Tonight on NewsWatch, the latest on what the Obama administration is saying about the contraception mandate in the president's health care law. Plus, cold conditions blasting parts of the country. We'll show you the areas hit the hardest by the first winter storm of 2014. And hear how Republicans plan to win back power in this new year. All this and more tonight on NewsWatch. Good evening. I'm Mark Martin. The Obama administration opposes a ruling that temporarily blocks some religious-based groups from adhering to the contraception mandate in the president's health care law, a mandate many organizations say violates their faith. George Thomas explains in tonight's top story.
The Justice Department today asked the Supreme Court not to exempt Catholic groups from offering birth control coverage under Obamacare. The filing comes after a surprise order from Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Late Tuesday, she issued a stay, stopping the government from enforcing the contraception mandate on a group of nuns at the Little Sisters of the Poor Home for the Aged. The Catholic group says the coverage requirement violates their religious beliefs, an argument that's been made against the mandate from different groups since it was introduced. From colleges to businesses, many organizations have filed suits against the birth control coverage.
To my knowledge, this is the largest number of lawsuits filed against the federal government on a religious liberty issue in the history of our country.
The principle that will be set down in these cases, we hope, will protect people from having their religious beliefs violated and coerced by heavy-handed government regulation.
To help all Americans see that there's a fundamental issue at stake here that affects all of us, cuts across a lot of our religious differences.
The administration has made exemptions for religious nonprofit groups. They are allowed to certify that they don't want to provide contraceptive coverage. The cost is then picked up by insurers. But the nuns from Little Sisters for the Poor say even signing that exemption violates their beliefs. The Beckett Fund is representing the group. In a statement, they called today's brief from the Justice Department unnecessary, saying, quote, "Our federal government is massive and powerful. It can obviously find ways to distribute contraceptives and abortion pills without forcing nuns to be involved." It's not yet known when Justice Sotomayor will make her final decision on the matter. George Thomas, CBN News.
The problems with the Obamacare website could leave many Americans with no health insurance at all. Because of the botched site launch and the last-minute crunch to sign up before January 1st, thousands and possibly millions of enrollees are not even sure if they have insurance. Applications haven't been processed, and insurance companies say they've received thousands of faulty applications from the government. Tens of thousands of potential Medicaid recipients in 36 states are also in limbo. The federal website that was supposed to send their applications to the states failed to do so. The White House says 2 million Americans have now signed up under the new health care law, but that's way short of the goal of more than 3 million. The Obama administration is seeking to overturn a federal court ruling on the likely unconstitutionality of a government phone monitoring program. The National Security Agency program collects records from the phones of every American. Back in December, U.S. District Judge Richard Leon said the NSA is appearing to violate the Fourth Amendment with the practice. Justice Department lawyers today appealed that decision. It's expected the case will make its way to the Supreme Court. A deadly storm continues to grip the Northeast and frustrate the plans of travelers across the country. It's blamed for 11 deaths already. As Heather Sells reports, concerns continue to mount over frigid temperatures and flight cancellations.
The first storm of the year has already dumped 2 feet of snow in parts of the Northeast, and places like eastern Massachusetts could see 30 inches by the time it's all over.
I think it's crazy. It came so fast.
This is bad, this is bad.
While thousands, including New York's mayor, are shoveling out, the temperatures are falling. Vermont saw -8 today and Boston 2 degrees, plus a wind chill of -20.
With sub-zero temperatures, you worry about frostbite, you worry about hypothermia.
Best thing that people can do, of course, is to stay safe, to stay warm, and stay indoors.
The storm has canceled schools and closed businesses from Maryland to Maine. It started Thursday in the Midwest, where it made driving difficult at best and paved the way for cross-country skiers interested in another way of getting around. So far, 22 states and 100 million people are feeling the storm's impact. Last night, Governor Cuomo closed 3 major interstates near New York City, and many air travelers across the country are grounded.
I have no idea when we get out of here.
Airlines canceled more than 2,300 flights on Thursday and close to another 2,000 today. Forecasters expect temperatures in the Northeast to rise above freezing this weekend before another blast of cold next week. Heather Sells, CBN News.
For more on this, we turn now to Joe Bastardi of weatherbell.com. Joe, these are some of the coldest temperatures the country has seen in recent years. What's behind the cold?
I will tell you this, Mark. The weather pattern for the mid and latter part of the winter looks a lot like last year. So the difference may be is we had the brutal start, and we get a little bit of a January thaw coming up, I think, for the middle part of the month. And then we go back into it across much of the country for later January, February, and into March.
Joe, in the past few years, we've heard many meteorologists and scientists talk about extreme weather like we've never seen before. Is that what we're seeing, and are we going to see more of it?
That's just utter nonsense. They assume that people don't understand there were 8 major hurricanes up the eastern seaboard in 7 years in the 1950s. They assume that people don't know that most of the state record highs were set in the 1930s. They assume that people don't know that, for instance, in 1938, a hurricane drove 15 feet of water into Providence, Rhode Island, had wind gusts to 186 miles an hour at Blue Hill, Massachusetts. So what happens is all these other extreme events people don't understand. And so you can get on instantly on TV today, oh, look at this tornado, it's over here, it's never happened before. And I think it's either delusional or deceptive, and that's my conclusion. And if people get upset about it, just go back and look at what has happened before, and you'll understand.
Interesting, interesting. Well, should we expect more cold weather like much of the country is seeing? You talked a little bit about this before. Elaborate just a little bit more quickly for us.
Well, the pattern is such that we're probably going to get a transition period where it's not as cold, even at what would be termed a January thaw. Now, the reason we have that term is because people in extreme winters before, extreme winters like we're having now, noticed that there would be a period when it would thaw out and then come back again. Because if you have a thaw, it usually is followed by something else. That's why the thaw stands out. So what we're expecting is the same kind of pattern that took over in the latter part of winter last year to take over again, which means that after a period where you may not have as much cold, we go back to cold and stormy again. In fact, I've been looking at the weather for the Super Bowl for quite a while. It's very, very interesting what the weather pattern looks like around that time.
Okay, well, can you give us a little sneak peek in that as far as?
I'll tell you what, that time between January 20th and February 10th looks cold and stormy in the eastern part of the United States. At least it does to me.
Okay. All right. Well, Joe Bastardi of weatherbell.com. Thanks for your time, Joe. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Mark, and you enjoy the weather because it's the only weather you got.
That's right. Well, turning now overseas, the U.S. State Department is urging all U.S. citizens currently in South Sudan to leave the country immediately. The department is evacuating many embassy personnel. That's because of a deteriorating security situation in the African nation. The U.S. has evacuated more than 400 U.S. citizens since fighting broke out in mid-December. The embassy says it will stop providing consular services in South Sudan as of tomorrow. In the midst of that ongoing violence in South Sudan, peace talks started today between the government and rebel leaders. The negotiations are being held in Ethiopia with the goal of stopping the increasing violence that's pushing South Sudan towards civil war. Caitlin Burke reports.
The world's newest country is in a state of emergency. So far, clashes between the South Sudan government and rebel forces have killed more than 1,000 people and displaced another 200,000.
The country is at a crossroads. It's at the fork in a road. But it can still be saved from further major escalations of violence.
Delegations from each of the warring sides have gathered in Ethiopia to set out demands for an end to violence.
We want to see these political talks succeed. any more deterioration of the situation on the ground in terms of the conflict will only lead to greater humanitarian needs in a country that is also already extremely poor.
South Sudan government officials say it's time for both sides to swallow their bitterness for the sake of the country.
What we need is unity. Unity and peace so that we make development. Now we kill ourselves, there is no incentive, nothing that we are going to gain at all.
But even as peace talks begin, South Sudan's army is closing in on the town of Bor. They hope to recapture the town from rebel forces and prevent them from reaching the nation's capital.
We are advancing to Bor because these people, they want to come to Juba. We have some fight, and our forces are moving toward Bor. So anytime we will be in Bor. Anytime. Of course, as we don't have yet a ceasefire. And we don't want them to come and get us somewhere here. So we have to go to them.
The government and rebels are under increasing pressure from both African and Western powers to reach a deal. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Coming up, escape from Iraq, how one new U.S. citizen grieves for the persecuted church in her home. Welcome back. Each year, close to 700,000 people become American citizens. Many come from war-torn countries or persecuted communities. John Jessup introduces us to one recently sworn-in American who's highlighting the plight of persecuted Christians in the Middle East.
A woman and Christian president of Iraq? Yeah, give it a couple more centuries.
Asil al-Banna has always been bright and optimistic. But unlike her positive personality, many of her childhood memories were scarred by the dark clouds of war.
I was very determined I needed to get away. I just couldn't see any future for myself.
She and her family fled Baghdad in 1991 to escape what seemed like endless fighting. She was 10 years old when the nearly decade-long Iran-Iraq war started, and 19 when U.S. troops launched Operation Desert Storm. After a month seeking refuge in Jordan, she convinced her dad to take her to a country she'd always dreamed of visiting.
I begged my father. I said, Dad, please, let's just go to the American embassy. Let's just try. It was like a dream to me, liberty and freedom of expression. I didn't grow up with that, so I really wanted it.
She and her father had round-trip tickets to visit relatives in Kentucky. But her aunt had other plans for Asil, and they didn't include returning to the dictatorial rule of Saddam Hussein.
She told my father, this girl I will never ever let her leave back with you. My father was like, what are you talking about? She's my daughter.
Asil's aunt helped her get into the University of Kentucky's architecture program. She graduated, started working in design, and has flourished in the U.S. ever since, feeling more American as time went by.
Being Iraqi, it's who I am, who I've been. Being American, on the other hand, is who I became, who I grew into.
And recently, on the 222nd anniversary of the U.S. Bill of Rights, she took the oath and became an American citizen. Surrounded by our founding documents at the National Archives in Washington, D.C.
This country is wonderful in opening its doors to immigrants, and very often you come and you rush through the process. For me, it was more of a growing experience, and so today it was more like I'm sealing the deal.
She still cares deeply for her native Iraq and its people, but her hopes have dimmed on an issue that hits close to home: the growing persecution of Christians in the Middle East.
Honestly, I don't see a future. I think it doesn't look good.
Asil is an Iraqi Christian, home to one of the world's oldest Christian populations.
It's considered a very honest and fair community, and they gave a lot to Iraq, to the country.
But after the Iraq War began, Christians became an easy target, frequently persecuted, tortured, or killed. In the last 10 years, of the more than 1 million Christians who once called Iraq home, only about a third are left, with more fleeing daily.
There's just no doubt that ancient and historic Christian communities are threatened as never before.
The situation is essentially the same in Syria and in Egypt, where civil unrest is making it nearly impossible for once ancient Christian communities to survive. With Middle East Christians on the verge of extinction, human rights advocates say it's time for Christians in America to stand up for their fellow believers.
One of the most powerful things that individual communities, church communities, and people as individuals can do is to reach out to their member of Congress and say, you know what, this is a top priority with me, and I want to know what you are doing about it.
For Seal, she hopes others can find a path to peace, freedom, and personal growth similar to her own journey. John Jessup, CBN News, Washington.
Up next, why their own party may be holding Republicans back from gaining power in Washington. This year, Republicans plan to take back the Senate, and they may be able to do just that thanks to the public backlash against the president's health care plan. But as David Brody explains in tonight's Focus Report, the GOP does face some tough challenges ahead.
Fireworks celebrate the new year, but for Republicans, November could mark a new beginning. The reason? Well, they have a chance to win control of the Senate and rule Capitol Hill. The GOP see Obamacare as their ace in the hole. And the chairman of the Republican National Committee tells CBN News they will use it every chance they get.
Politically, the answer is let Obamacare go through. We'll tattoo it to their foreheads and beat them in 2014. The problem with the political answer is that it's a painful thing for a lot of people.
That pain can be felt across the country. In Cooperstown, North Dakota, Brooke Frederickson found out she couldn't keep her health care plan, even though the president said she could.
It was a lie. It was a lie. There's millions of Americans all over the country. Just turn on the news. You know, it's really sad.
And it's costing President Obama at the wrong time. His approval numbers are down to 43%. That's even lower than George W. Bush, who sat at 47% after 5 years of his presidency. And it could drop even further if the president and Democrats don't quickly resolve Obamacare issues. Republicans need 6 seats to control the Senate, and they're going to go after moderate Democrats who supported Obamacare.
I think it's a political liability for any Democrat who voted for it. Most Senate Democrats, it passed by, it was 1 vote margin, so every single one of them who voted for it cast the deciding vote.
Ads are already in full swing.
Mary Landrieu cast the deciding vote for Obamacare.
If I had to vote for the bill again, I would vote for it tomorrow.
And the strategy for vulnerable Democrats? Keep your distance from the president.
Senator Landrieu says President Obama needs to stick to his word.
But Senate Democrats will not be the only ones fighting for their political survival. On the Republican side, some longtime GOP establishment senators are going to get challenges from Tea Party-backed candidates. It's already happening at the top, where Tea Party conservative Matt Bevin is going after Senate leader Mitch McConnell. Others, like Lindsey Graham and John Cornyn, face primary fights as well. This also marks the other political theme of 2014, the Tea Party versus the establishment. The Tea Party wants strong constitutional conservatives in office. The old guard wants to grow their numbers, even if candidates don't toe the conservative line. This debate played out in 2012 after some Tea Party primary winners faltered, and then they received the blame for costing Republicans control of the Senate.
We let races slip out of our hands, and we really let the Senate majority slip away from us over these last 2 cycles. That's something that all of us ought to agree is something we should never allow to happen.
But that won't be easy. Special interest groups from both sides of the spectrum are already arming for the fight. Senator John McCain tells CBN News all this bickering has to stop.
We've all got to work together, hash out our differences, but our adversary is the Democrat Party, not the Republican Party. Let the Republican primary voters decide who our candidates are going to be, rather than pouring money in attack ads against Republicans raised from Republicans. That doesn't make any sense.
That leaves Senate control in doubt. While in the House, Republicans should still be in charge after the midterm elections. That doesn't mean, however, it's going to be an easy road for Speaker John Boehner. He faces a determined Tea Party caucus and outside groups like Club for Growth and Heritage Action.
I think they're pushing our members in places where they don't want to be. And frankly, I just think that they've lost all credibility.
Talk radio host Mark Levin believes a fight over the true meaning of conservatism is at hand.
They need to embrace and reacquaint themselves with conservative principles, constitutional republicanism, and make the case over and over and over again, and at every angle, fight for it. At every turn, fight for it.
So 2014 begins with a fireworks show that will only get hotter as the elections get closer. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Up next, what a 9-year-old girl does when her mom goes into labor with no one else to help. In times of emergency, people react differently. One Chicago girl is the perfect example of staying calm under pressure. Monique Meza went into labor at her home and was unable to get to a hospital in time, and that's when her 9-year-old daughter, Alyssa, stepped in. She helped her mom through the delivery from beginning to end, even speaking to her and telling her what to do. When the baby came out with the umbilical cord tangled around its neck, Alyssa calmly unwrapped it like she had seen on a medical TV show.
She felt the baby coming out, and I told her, push the baby out, and I'll catch the baby. And she got scared, but then I catch the baby, and I grabbed the towel, I wrapped her around.
For her age, very, very mature. I know she has a bright future ahead of her, and I'm very, very proud of her.
Well, she sure does. Alyssa proved that she can handle an emergency despite her young age. She says she wants to be a paramedic someday. She's well on her way. Well, that's all for this edition of NewsWatch. Remember, you can email us your comments and questions at newswatch@cbn.com. Hope you'll join us next time. Have a great weekend.